The road ran directly in front of their house. Inside the house lived a father with his 2 sons. Now the elder son, as elder sons tend to be, was a compliant lad. He was a good worker. He always did what father asked. The younger son, though, was a bit of a dreamer. He would sometimes sit on the porch and stare at the road that ran directly in front of their house. A road that certainly must have come from someplace far away and exotic. A road that certainly continued on to someplace equally far away and exotic. It ignited something in his imagination. Some kind of wanderlust was birthed in him. The smell of cinnamon and cardamom, saffron coming to him from the road. And something in him longed to travel that road. So much so that as he got to be a young man, he came to his father and he said, "Father, you know the kind of guy I am. You know what's in me. You know I'm never going to be happy in this little place. I've got to get out and see the world. I've got to see the big world. I've got to see what's at the other end of this road where those caravans plod along. The smell of the spices that come to me from those caravan calls me. The look of those women who are different calls to me. So Father, if you'd be so kind, could you please give me my inheritance now so that I can have my adventure?" The father complied. I'm sure he had to sell some things. All of this so he could hand his son a bag of gold coins, half of the estate. The son took the bag, and just so it didn't appear that it was all about the money, I'm sure he waited a day or two, and then he said goodbye to his older brother, goodbye to his father. He put his foot on that road and took the first step away from home, down the road to that faraway exotic place that he was sure was out there. He traveled and he traveled. And sure enough, he found it was true. Everything he had imagined was true. He did find that far-off exotic land he had been dreaming about. He found those women that he had been dreaming about. And he found that in that country, it didn't matter that he wasn't from there. He had a bag of money. He found that it didn't matter that they didn't know his father. He had a bag of money. He found that the girls really liked his foreign accent. He had a bag of money. Oh, those were the days, the stories he was going to be able to tell, the adventure he was having. But finally came the day when he reached his hand in the bag and pulled out the last coin, tipped it upside down, nothing but dust, and he asked himself the question, now what? He paid his bar tab and set out to look for work. There was no other alternative. Unfortunately for him, the country was going through a difficult economic time, a downturn, if you will, and work was not to be had. And now it turned out that it did matter that his father wasn't from around there. It did matter that he spoke the language only poorly. It did matter to the girls that he didn't have the bag of money. Finally, he found a job, but it was disgusting work. He found a job taking care of filthy animals, animals that where he came from were inedible. For him, they would have been, to me, like big rats. And here he was feeding these big, filthy rats because these disgusting people ate these big rats. And this was his job, to stand out in the filth that these animals made and feed them day after day. He sold his ring to try to have some money, just have food to eat. He sold his clothing. His sandals wore out. Finally, one day, he was out there in the middle of the animals, feeding them, and it's like a light bulb came on. He's like, what am I doing here? I don't have to be here. In fact, I remember what it was like in my father's house. Not only was there food for us as sons, but there was food enough for all the employees. That's it. I'll go back. Here's what I'll do. And he recited to himself a refrain. He said the sentences he would say to his father when he returned home. He said, here's what I'll say. I'll say, Father, I know I have been an embarrassment, a disappointment to you and to your God. And I'm not asking you to take me back as your son, but could you take me back as a hired hand? Well, he repeated that refrain over and over in his head, working up the courage to swallow his pride and go home. The day came. We said, today's the day. He stepped out of that animal pen. He put his foot on the path that led to the lane, that led to the street, that led to the road, that ran directly in front of his father's house. He began the long journey home. What he didn't know was that every day since he had left, his father had been watching for him. Father hadn't forgotten. No. The father's heart made him every day stop what he was doing, and he would look up, he would search that road to see if Junior might be coming back down that road. He would look for that solitary traveler coming home. Or perhaps he'd have a wife, or perhaps children. He would search the road, but day after day was disappointed. Until this day, Father was at his work. He looked up. He did see a solitary traveler coming down the road. But no, that couldn't be him. But you know how there's something unique in every person's walk? It's just like you can see the way they walk and you know it's them. Well, the father raised his eyes again to see this son. He looked at him coming down the road, and he said, yes, I think that is him. Something about the walk tells me that is my son. He threw down whatever he was doing. He grabbed up his robe. He took off running across the field, hurdled the stone fences, down the ditch, up on the road, reaches his son, gives him a big hug. Yes, it was his son. He kisses those dirty, smelly cheeks. He picks him up. He twirls him around. My son, you've come home. The joy overflowing in his heart that the son who was lost has come home, that the son who was dead is now alive. He called back to the house, to one of the servants, all the servants whose heads were poking out of the windows and out the doors. Quick, he said, bring a robe. One of them came running with a robe. He put it on his son. Quick, he said, bring some shoes. Another one came running with some new sandals, slipped them on his poor, crusty, dirty feet. Then father took off the ring. The younger son began his refrain. Remember what he'd been practicing? And he said, Father, I know I've been a disappointment. I've been an embarrassment to you and to your God. And I'm not asking you to take me back as your son. I mean, I know that can't happen. But Father said, shh. He took the ring, the family ring, and he slipped it back on his son's finger. He turned to the house and called to the rest of the servants, a party, we're going to have a party, because my son who was dead is alive. My son who was lost has been found. Kill the calf that we've been saving for a party, because today we are going to have a big blowout party. This is a day to celebrate. Now you'll remember that there was a second son. And while all this joyful reunion was going on, the first son was doing what elder sons do, which is they do their job. He was out in the field. He was doing his duty. He was faithfully preparing the land. He was harvesting the land. He was doing what he should do. Now it's nightfall. He starts to come in with his work crew, starts to come into the house. As they draw near the house, he says, well, that's funny. What's that sound of music? What day is this? Thursday. I don't remember there was supposed to be music today. That's odd. As they got a little nearer, they could see not only is there music, they can see there's a bonfire. They can see people dancing. They can see this is a big festival. What could be going on? How could this be? He didn't even know about it. So as they get right up to the house, here a servant comes running out from the bonfire. And he says, isn't it great, big brother? Isn't it wonderful? Junior's come home. Big brother said, no. In fact, it's not great at all. If that ne'er-do-well thinks he can just skip back in here without missing a beat, like nothing's ever happened, he's got another thing a-coming. He sat down on a stump outside the house, refusing to go into the party. For the second time that day, Father had to come out and speak to one of his sons. He came out and he said, son, isn't it great? Junior's come home. The older son said, no, it's not great, Dad. You know, I've worked for you faithfully day in and day out, and you have never so much as killed a goat for us so that my friends and I could have a party. And now this Junior comes home. He spent all his money on harlots and who knows what kind of riotous living. And you're throwing him a party? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. The father said, yeah, but son, everything I have is yours. It's always been yours. He was lost and now he's found. He was dead and now he's alive. Can't that bring out the celebration in you? Can't you rejoice with us today? And that's one small part of God's big story.